What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Dungeon coming at you with another Builder's Guide video. And in this one, we're going to be talking about armor and shields. I figured we'd move on to this particular subject because while it might not be extremely instrumental in creating a build, it definitely is something that you need to think about. The last couple ones we did weapons and attributes and stuff, and yes, those are more important, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be familiar with what you can do with different armor and shields. So let's go ahead and get straight away right into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is armor. In particular, the defensive stats of armor that you wear. So when you are taking a look at what type of armor you want to pick, you have a bunch of equipment statuses that are listed, if I could find them over here, that are listed over here on the right hand side for equipment statuses, and you've got a bunch of things listed over here for defense. Alright, you've got physical defense as well as strike, physical defense slash thrust for the different type of attacks, physical attacks, and then you have magic to fire, lightning, and dark. So these numbers, let's go ahead and get out of there. These numbers actually will help you to reduce the amount of damage that you take in. And picking the different type of armor, typically, you have to balance, how much of weight that something has, which is down here at the very bottom, right here at the weight. So how much that has, how much durability it has, and stuff like that, compared to how much defenses and other things that you are looking at. And the higher the defense, basically, the better. While typically heavier armor has, in general, higher defenses, more often than not, it's just higher physical defenses, and not necessarily defenses all around. Like, take a look at this right here. It is considerably lighter, but when you compare that to, this heavier armor right here, the robes actually have better resistances for, like, your elemental, right? So typically certain armors will actually do better versus elements, but not necessarily as good against, physical. And for those of you who are wondering why that noise keeps happening, I'll get to that in just a second. Alright, but first thing I want to do before that is talk about that last block all the way on the right hand side. So that last block, it's actually not defenses, and that is status effects. So you've got poison, bleed, petrify, and curse. These are pretty much like defenses. It just kind of depends on, like, how the higher it is, then the slower your meter will raise when you take in, like, poison damage or bleed damage or so on and so forth. So for instance, there is a helmet. It's not really a helmet, it's a veil. It's got 1000 curse resistance, and against any, like, enemy that will do curse damage, this is really good, actually. So, like, I think the end boss, Nishandra, she will induce curse. So having this on can potentially be, like, really helpful. You know what I'm saying? Alright. Next thing I want to talk about are the effects. So the helmet that I'm wearing right now, it has a specific effect that is actually really cool. And that is that the crown of the Iron King will have, let's go ahead and pull that up here. That will have, it doesn't say it on here, but what will happen is, and this is the case for a lot of items, armored items and stuff like that, that it'll have an effect, and it might not be listed. Like, this isn't listed, doesn't have an effect listed, whereas some other ones do. I'm gonna go ahead and find, like, this one right here. This one says it extends the duration of spell effects, but that doesn't mean that other helmets don't do something. Like the symbol of Avarice, and the Crown of the Old King, because they do have effects too. And sometimes you have to, like, it's kind of tedious because you'll have to look up each item to see what it does. Alright, so this one will regenerate spells. So I'll go ahead and show you. Let me go ahead and cast this. And by the way, this shield's actually super cool, man. This is the disc chime. It's pretty darn cool, man. It acts as a buff to spells when you have chime in the opposite hand, but it also can cast spells too. It's pretty darn cool. But see how it says I only have one sunlight blade? Now we'll check it in a second, but it'll actually replenish that one after 2 minutes. It'll replenish all my spells that I use by 20%. So if the spell, and it rounds up, so if 20% rounded up is a fraction, it'll go up to the next one. Well, 20% of 1, or 2 rather, is going to be less than 1, but round up and it becomes 1. So we'll see that here in just a second, and next time it does that. So while you know, some of these do actually say the effects, not all of them do. So you might have to look some of these up, because some of the effects are actually really, really cool. Between both, you know, armors and shields. And I know we're not really talking about shields, but you know, the disc chime is one of them. It doesn't say it on the description when you take a look at the disc chime. It says that you can use miracles and hexes, but it doesn't say anything about the buff that it gives. So there's the crown giving me an additional spell. So you can only get this crown in the DLC, and you've got to do a lot of work to get it. But I mean, it can be super duper duper cool. You know what I'm saying? Alright, let's go on to the next thing. One more thing that I gotta mention about effects is that some effects will actually involve the increase of attributes. So if you're looking to increase a particular attribute, might be a good idea to actually look that up, because for instance, the hat that I'm wearing, the moon hat, will increase a couple statistics, and I can kind of show you real quick how that works. So this particular character only has an intelligence of a 30, yet with this thing I've got a 32. When you remove it, take a look again, now it's a 30. So something important that you probably should be considering is that some stats will increase those statistics, some armors will increase statistics, and you know, that might be something that you'll look for when you are trying to create a build. It's not just the regular effects that it does, but also the attributes that it can raise. And that could have an effect, especially if you're getting your attunement or something like that raised, because you'll have more spells to cast. So we're going to move on to Poise. And Poise is really, really important and different from the Poise of the weapon, because the Poise of the weapon is technically Poise Break. So I'll go ahead and show you what the weapon Poise is this right here. And it should be called Poise Break, honestly, because that's what it's like Poise Damage, alright? So that's not the same as Poise. So while this mace has 30 Poise Damage, or Poise Break, they like to call it, the armor has Poise right here. So this one, Lydia's Black Robe, I'll show you real quick, has 0 Poise. There it is, Poise, right here. The ability to withstand an impact attack. Weak Poise makes it easier to be knocked off balance. So like if you're trying to make an attack and you get hit, and the damage, the Poise damage that the weapon does, exceeds your Poise of all your armor added up, it'll stop your attack, and then you won't complete your attack. Alright, so having a good Poise can make a big difference. So here's a Drake Keeper's armor. It's got a 40 Poise. Old Knight armor has a 50 Poise, which, by the way, 50 Poise is a lot of Poise. Alright, it is a lot of Poise. Probably one of the highest just generic pieces of armor that you can get that has high numbers of Poise. I mean, this stuff right here, the All-Own Captain armor is only 38. we'll keep looking around at different Poise. Some have 0, a lot have 0 actually, and others have, here's 47, the dwarf armor, you know. So something to look at, and this really is important, whether you're doing PvE or PvP, because if you can't get your attack off because someone is spamming you with a dagger, then you're gonna die, you know what I'm saying? So it definitely is something that you want to consider, and you don't have to have it all in the just chest armor, you know. It can be in your legs or your arms or whatever, your helmet. And this is something that doesn't actually change when you upgrade your armor. We're going to talk about that in a second. So here's like a regular Vengar armor, and here's a +5. So it doesn't have a big difference, or it doesn't have any difference as far as Poise goes. I mean, so something to keep in mind. All right. And it's also very, very, very important depending on what type of character. If you're using a ranged character, it might not matter at all, in which case, you know, wear lighter robe armors and get you know, benefits to elemental damage in case you get spells, you know, cast up on you, or effects or whatever. But I mean, if you're going to be doing some melee and stuff, it might be a good idea to have some measure of poise so that you don't have your attacks broken and you're thrown off balance. Alright? So the next thing I want to talk about is upgrading your armor. In order to do so, you talk to any of the blacksmiths that can reinforce your weapons, and instead of doing the weapon, you will actually click on the armor reinforcements, and then you just kind of scroll down to whatever armor you're wearing or you want to upgrade, and you can put in the required upgrade materials, whether it be Titanite or Twinkling Titanite. I do not believe any of them require petrified dragon bones, but so I will say that does kind of make a difference, because, you know, some of the regular upgrade materials is pretty easy to get your hand on, but some of the like Twinkling Titanite, it might be a little bit difficult for you to find those things depending on where you are in the game and stuff. Like if you're pretty far along in the game, then you shouldn't have a problem. There's places where you can farm for the Twinkling Titanite, but if you're kind of early game, or if you did a new game plus and then you know, you're early in that area, then it might be difficult to get your hands on that Twinkling Titanite. So if you are kind of leaning towards a specific type of armor setup, make sure that you upgrade that stuff before you go to the bonfire in Majula and select that you want to go to the next playthrough. Alright, and the benefits that you get actually are probably, I would say they're probably worth it. So here's the difference between the Vengar armor +5 and the regular Vengar armor. So in most of the defensive categories, you can see on this particular piece of armor, it increases by about 100 defenses for the physical. For the you know, elemental resistances, it's not so much, but it is getting close to probably about 50% increase to 100% increase, somewhere in there, depending on which one that it is. So I mean, it definitely helps. Every little bit helps. The one thing it doesn't do, like I was showing earlier, is it doesn't really affect your poise for the armor. So whatever poise you have picked, for whatever armor you've picked, that poise, if that's like the reason why you picked it, or if it's not, just know that that's not going to really change the more you upgrade it, okay? And it's not just your body armor, but you can do that for pretty much any type of, you know, armor. So this is the one that my character typically uses. I know it's a little bit annoying to hear that every 2 minutes when it refreshes my spells, but man, it's pretty cool when you're mobbing, when you're going through, like I've gone through with this character on multiple new games, And when you're mobbing, it's really fun to be able to just constantly cast your most powerful spells at mobs. It's pretty darn fun. But like your regular upgrade material type armors, you know, they might not be as strong, but like for this one, the main reason I'm using it, most people already know, is because of it improving my casting speed. So whatever reason you've picked, I would, if you're gonna stick with it, just upgrade it. It's, you know, you'll get more out of it, you know what I'm saying? So that's that. Last thing that I want to touch on with regard to armor is that the choice of armor that you have picked, aside from the effects that it grants you and the poise, it kind of doesn't matter a whole lot. Like, it helps, every little bit helps, you know what I'm saying? But what's most important is, I mean, let's be honest, how does it look? Because if it doesn't look cool, then, you know, you probably shouldn't wear it. So let me give you a couple examples. So yeah, this probably wouldn't be a good idea. I'm pairing a flower skirt with King's armor and some Lion Mage cuffs and the Crown of the Sunken King. You know, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't do it. This looks kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I think it could work. It's a little bit rough around the edges, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, it could work. So this could be cool if you're looking for kind of like a fairy kind of look. Fairy princess, you know, I got the crown on top, you know. And as a little bonus, you don't even have to run, but you're just walking, you can jump, and which is really cool. So that's awesome. And it poisons people. So if you don't mind that, it's all good. And, I mean, this one could work for sure. Especially for a Halloween type of build, you know what I'm saying? And you can always go with pretty much full sets of gear and stuff like that. Whatever type of look you're going for, you know, it's up to you. And honestly, to be real, it really doesn't matter. Especially, you know, if you're not really getting into PvP, I mean, whatever you want, you know what I'm saying? Keep in mind those things we talked about, especially the poise, the weight, the effects. The effects are really, really, really big. And, you know, as an afterthought, really should be your defensive values, because they don't play a humongous role. You know, there'll be some defensive values, and that's that. So, let's move on to shields. Alright, with regard to your shield, we pretty much have the same topics, alright? As far as like your defensive values and stuff, the big difference between those defensive values is with your shield, instead of it just holding a number for defensive value and it goes up to about 1,000, these ones they cap out at 100, and that's because they're percentiles of damage reduction. So in general, when choosing a shield, you want to consider, like, alright, what percentage is the shield going to block for physical? That's the main one that you want to consider. So here's a Drake Keeper shields that I've got, and it will block 100% of physical damage, and that's shown with that first number on top right over here. After that, everything else is you know, not as important, honestly. You've got magic, fire, lightning, all your elements, your status effects, curse, you know, and then a few other stats down here, which we'll talk about in a moment. But as far as the percentages goes, the first one's really the main one. It doesn't have to be exactly 100. That's usually really cool if it is. But anywhere is a 90 or above, it's usually pretty good. So it kind of opens it up for a lot of different shields. Because, you know, there's a lot that have a 90 plus. Other things you want to consider besides these is the size. So regular medium shields like this one and this one, they have a just like pretty regular parry window, and they do a pretty decent job at, you know, just in general. But some of the smaller ones like the buckler and so on and so forth, the small shields have a little bit larger parry window. So if I switch to this, I kind of show you when you do your parry animation, it'll actually be able to parry a little easier than the other shields. So if you're just kind of learning how to do a parry, then these might be a good idea to practice with. You know what I'm saying? Aside from that, your larger shields, so your great shields have a little bit different option for when you actually R2. It does like a smash. So it's not the same thing as a parry, you know what I'm saying? The cool thing about these though is they have something that the other shields don't have. Alright, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But those are your main differences, having to do with your defenses, which are percentile of damage reduction, and the size, parry window, and whatever it does with R2, and obviously always consider the weight. Always consider the weight. Alright, move on to the next thing. So, you can upgrade your shields, and here I am in front of Steady Hand McDuff. But the other thing you can do is infuse your shield. And when you do that, just like with weapons, when you infuse them, you will increase whatever it is you're infusing it with, but then decrease everything else. So with this Rebel Great Shield, I infused it with fire, and now my fire resistance is 100%. So whenever I take fire damage, if I block, then I can reduce that fire damage by 100%. So I won't take any damage. And you know, when fighting, say, the ancient dragon, that could be really, really cool, you know, because then you can avoid taking that damage to some extent, right? Because you know, it also depends on how much stamina you have to continue to block through the attack, especially if it's a prolonged attack like the ancient dragon's fire breath is. But you can choose to do that with other shields. Like here I've got the magic Havel shield, so it reduces my magic damage by 100%. You already saw the dragon chime, or not dragon chime, the disc chime, and that reduces my lightning by 90%. And you know, there's a bunch of different weapons that you can do different things with, and when you increase the ranking of it, so by upgrading, then that also will add to how much you can reduce, because every little bit that you increase it by, every little bit that you upgrade it by, it'll increase the damage reduction, which again, those are working on percentiles. So the other thing that it will do when you upgrade, and this is pretty important to consider, not that it does it a whole lot, but it does do some degree, is when you upgrade these, sometimes, not every single time, but sometimes it'll actually also increase the weapon stability. So for the Watch Dragon Parma, if I increase it from +1 to +2, it'll increase the stability by 1. Alright, and we'll talk about that right now, actually. So, I do want to talk about stability, and this is probably one of the more important aspects of your shield, aside from physical damage reduction. And each shield has a different stability, and again, if you forgot where that is, it's right over here. And that basically marks how much stamina that will be, the higher the number, the lower the amount of stamina that will be drained when you are blocking an attack. So usually the higher the stability, the higher the weight, but some shields, such as the Twin Dragon Great Shield, actually has a pretty low weight and a high stability. So this got a 65 stability, whereas some of the medium shields, aside from the Drake Keeper shield right here, which is ranked up all the way, most of them have like 45 or 50 or something like that. So here's a good one that I like to use, the Watch Dragon Parma. You get it real early, you get it right where I'm pretty much at in the game, and it only has a 50 stability, which, you know, for a medium shield is about average, I'd say. But you know, here's the Drangleic shield, which is 100% resistant shield, and it's got a 55 stability. going back to this Dragon Great Shield, it's got a 65, but I mean, take a look at the difference between the Drangleic Shield. This has only, it's a one pound heavier, but it's got a plus 10 stability. Obviously, the difference is, you know, it's got a parry instead of a, you know, a strike attack, you know, when you R2. But, you know, it's something to consider, because like Havel's Great Shield is super heavy comparison, you know what I'm saying, as most of the other Great Shields actually. So all things considered, some of the Great Shields, this one is actually one of the better ones because of the weight. So light. So keep that in mind. Stability, very, very important. And by the way, yes, that is Majula. So the last thing you want to consider is what type of effect does the shield have. Particular shield that I have right now, it can actually cast miracles and sorceries, I think even hexes and stuff like that. This thing can cast just about everything. It is a pretty cool shield. It's a Sanctum shield, but it's not the only one, because the Disc Chime actually is pretty darn good for casting miracles and stuff like that. You've got other shields that, for instance, the Watch Dragon Parma, which increases your item discovery, and the Wicked Eye Great Shield rather. This one will absorb HP. So I mean, each one you want to take a look and see what it does, because some of them do different things. And just like the last thing I was talking about, or the armor rather, when I was talking about it, some of these actually don't say that it does anything, but it does. Like this one right here, it doesn't say that it increases item discovery, but it does, because some of them, in particular this one, it didn't in the original format of the game, it didn't, but after I think it was patch 1.10, it increased this shield's item discovery from 0 to 50. So do keep that in mind. Some of these you'll have to actually look up and see if it actually does anything, but others it'll actually say what it does, if it does anything at all. So those pretty much everything you need to know with regard to armor and shields. There might be one thing that I maybe kind of glossed over or overlooked. So if you notice anything that is important to you, go ahead and let me know. Put a comment in the area below, and let everyone know. Otherwise, as always, thank you for checking out the channel and watching this episode. Stay cool, and bye everyone.